Amina had always known her family valued her less than her brothers, but she never imagined they would sell her like livestock. At 19, thin from years of neglect and exhausted from working fields she never owned, she listened in silence. As her father bartered her life away, the village elder sat with him, nodding as if Amina's fate were a simple business matter. "She is barren," her father said proudly, as if announcing an advantage. "Useless for heirs, but hard-working." Amina felt the words like stones thrown at her chest. Barren, useless, worthless. She had heard it whispered for years, but hearing her father sell her for it carved something deep inside her a cold, silent wound. The man buying her wasn't even from the village. He was a rancher from the far plains, a widower named Cole Harding. The villagers said he was quiet, hard-working, a man who came for supplies twice a year and returned to his empty ranch without a single companion. Rumors said his wife had died young, and since then he kept to himself, avoiding talk of marriage and children. Amina expected a cruel buyer, perhaps eager for a cheap servant, perhaps angered at her supposed infertility. But Cole was different. From the moment he stepped into her father's courtyard, he didn't leer at her. He didn't inspect her like property. He simply looked at her with calm, steady eyes, as if waiting for her to see something in him safety, perhaps. Her father pushed her toward him. "She cannot give children," he repeated. "That is why her price is low." Cole's jaw tightened, but not in anger at her. He turned to her father and said softly, "I'm not buying her for children." Those words made Amina lift her eyes for the first time. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. Why would a man buy a woman if he didn't need heirs? She didn't know that Cole, after losing both his wife and unborn child in a tragic accident, had vowed to never demand children of any woman again. The journey to the ranch was long and quiet. Amina sat rigid on the wagon's edge, her hands clasped in her lap. She expected yelling, commands, harsh punishments. But Cole only asked if she was cold and gave her his coat when she lied and said she wasn't. She was too afraid to refuse. When they arrived, the ranch wasn't the frightening place she imagined. It was lonely, yes, silent fields, an empty porch, a kitchen that hadn't seen warmth in years. But it wasn't dangerous. Cole showed her her own room clean, small, with a real bed and told her gently, "You can rest today. Work can wait." Amina stared at him in disbelief. No man had ever spoken to her like that. In the following days, she saw that Cole kept to his word. He didn't demand anything from her except honesty. He didn't touch her without permission. He didn't question her quietness. Slowly, she began to help around the house, sweeping floors, tending gardens, cooking simple meals. She expected criticism, but Cole only thanked her. Always softly, always sincerely, for the first time in her life. Her presence mattered. But even as she adjusted to her new life, whispers of barren echoed in her mind. She didn't know that her frail body, thin and exhausted from years of hunger, was the only reason she never menstruated regularly. She didn't know that with proper food, rest, and warmth, her health would slowly return, and she definitely didn't know that. Cole's quiet kindness wasn't pity, it was a man's heart beginning to heal, because while Amina thought she was, the one bought in a bargain. She didn't realize that Cole believed he was the lucky one. Amina never imagined her life would change with a single signature, but that was how her father sold her quickly, quietly, and without the slightest hesitation. Cole Harding, the widowed rancher who purchased her, signed the document with a still unreadable face. Amina thought he looked like a man carrying boulders on his shoulders, heavy with a weight she couldn't name. Her father pushed her forward. "She's barren," he said flatly, as if announcing a flaw in a mule he wanted to be rid of. "Don't expect children." Amina lowered her head, shame burning her chest, though she didn't truly understand what made her barren. She only knew neglect, hunger, and exhaustion. No one had ever cared enough to ask about her health. Cole's reaction surprised her. He didn't flinch, didn't bargain, didn't question. Instead, he said in a low voice, "I don't need children." Then, almost as if he regretted saying it aloud, he added more softly, "Not anymore." Amina couldn't look him in the eyes after that. The moment they reached the ranch, she expected harsh rules, detailed orders, maybe even a demand to act like a proper wife. But Cole simply showed her around the house, pointing out the kitchen, the pantry, the porch, and finally a small room with a neat, clean bed. "This is yours," he said. "Mine." She had never owned a single thing in her life. "Yes, he replied gently. "You're not a servant here, Amina. Just take your time, learn the place, no rush." She didn't know how to respond. Freedom was more frightening than captivity. Cole kept his distance for days. He ate his meals quietly and worked long hours outside, giving her space to adjust. It felt strange, almost suspicious, how patient he was. Amina waited for the moment he would reveal his true intentions, but that moment never came. Instead, she found him tending to the ranch hands, treating them with respect. He asked her once if she needed new clothes. Another day, he quietly left a bowl of fruit on the table, noticing she barely ate. His kindness confused her more than cruelty ever had. As she began to feel safer, Amina slowly took charge of the home. She swept floors, organized shelves, washed blankets, and cooked simple meals, though she apologized every time she wasn't sure they tasted right. Cole only smiled kindly and said, "It's more than I had before. Thank you." Days passed. Then weeks. Their silent routine became a form of comfort, but whispers from the village eventually reached her. When Cole went to buy supplies, someone muttered, "He bought a barren wife." Amina's breath caught in her chest. Even here, her supposed flaw followed her. That evening, she couldn't eat. Cole noticed immediately. "What happened?" He asked gently. She hesitated, then whispered, "People say I cannot give you what a wife should." Cole froze. Then, slowly, he reached across the table, careful, respectful before. Speaking in a steady voice, "Amina, I did not buy you 4 children. I bought the chance to not be alone anymore." Her eyes widened, tears forming. No man had ever said she herself mattered. "My wife died," he continued quietly, "and with her, I lost a child I never got to hold. After that, I decided I would never force that dream on anyone again." He swallowed, looking down. "Don't expect anything from you except honesty and kindness, and you've already given me both." Amina had no words. For the first time, she felt seen not as potential, not as a duty, but as a human being. Little did she know that as her health improved, real meals, warm nights, safety, her body would slowly heal. And one day, when she least expected it, her past and her future would collide in a way neither she nor Cole saw coming. But for now, healing had begun not from medicine, but from gentleness. Amina arrived at Cole Harding's ranch, carrying nothing but the clothes on her back and the bruises on her past. Her family had sold her quickly, eagerly calling her barren, as if it were a stain that ruined her value. What they never admitted was that the label was a punishment. Amina had refused a powerful suitor in her village, and her father decided to break her spirit by branding her useless. By the time Cole bought her, she had learned to expect pain before kindness, orders before breath, and silence before safety. But Cole was not the kind of man she had been raised to fear. The ranch was large, quiet, almost solemnist, like the man who owned it. Cole showed her a small room next to the kitchen, clean and softly lit. "This is yours," he said. He didn't close the door behind her. He didn't demand she share his bed. That alone confused her. He let her rest for 2 full days. No chores, no questions, no suspicious glances. She slept long hours, waking from nightmares, expecting someone to yell, but the ranch only offered silence. Cole himself was made of silence. His grief lived in his tall, strong frame like an invisible scar. His late wife's portrait hung in the hallway's oft eyes, gentle smile, holding a child she never got to birth. Amina noticed Cole always looked away from it. They were 2 broken people living under the same roof, but neither realized how their wounds mirrored each other. Amina began working slowly, first washing dishes, then sweeping the wooden floors. She was scared to make noise, scared to do something wrong. When she once dropped a cup and it shattered, she froze, heart pounding. Waiting for punishment, Cole only looked at the shards and said softly, "It's just a cup, Amina. Are you all right?" She nodded, though her trembling hands said otherwise. He didn't press her. He simply cleaned up the pieces and placed another cup on the shelf. It was the first time she saw gentleness without a price. Days passed, and Amina regained a little strength. She learned to feed the chickens, water the garden, and prepare simple food. Her body slowly responded to good meals and safety, her cheeks filling out, her eyes losing their constant fear. But the nights were harder. Nightmares clawed at her sleep hands, grabbing her, voices shouting, her father's cold words echoing. Some nights she woke up gasping. One evening, Cole found her sitting outside on the porch, trembling in the moonlight. He didn't touch her, he didn't ask questions, he just sat on the opposite end of the step, close enough to stay, far enough. "Not to frighten her," Amina whispered. "I am not good enough, not for anyone." Cole looked at her with a softness she didn't understand. "You're more than good enough," he said. "You've survived things that would have broken many. There is strength in you, even if you can't see it yet." Her eyes filled with tears. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Over the next weeks, Cole encouraged her gently, not with grand gestures, but with quiet trust. He asked her opinion about which seeds to plant, what curtains to sew, how to arrange the pantry. Each small choice made her feel like she belonged. Amina slowly realized that Cole himself was haunted. He had lost his wife, he had lost a child he had never held. His grief made him distant, but not cold. He understood pain, which is why he never added to hers. One evening, as they shared supper in comfortable silence, Amina whispered, "You've given me a life I didn't expect." Cole looked at her for a long moment. "You deserve more than what was done to you," he said. And in that moment, Amina understood. She was not living in a stranger's house. She was healing in a man's quiet, patient heart. Neither of them knew it yet, but this broken beginning would be the start of a beautiful future. Neither thought they deserved. Amina had been taught all her life to stay quiet. Quiet when the world wronged her. Quiet when her family dismissed her. Quiet when the powerful man in the village cornered her and demanded she marry him. Quiet when she finally gathered the courage to refuse him. That refusal sealed her fate. Her family didn't defend her. They didn't protect her. They silenced her, branding her barren, to destroy her reputation and make her unwanted. Then they sold her before she could speak a single word in her defense. When the widowed rancher Cole Harding arrived to take her, she didn't know what to expect. She kept her eyes down, lips pressed tightly together. Her father repeated the lie easily: she cannot give children. Useless for heirs. That is why her price is low. Cole's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes flickered, not anger at her, but at the situation. He simply nodded and said, "I'm not looking for children." Amina was led to the wagon. She stepped into her new life the same way she left her old one, silently. The journey to the ranch was long, dust swirling behind the wheels. Cole glanced at her occasionally, as if he wanted to speak, but every time she tensed, he looked away. Finally, he asked gently, "Are you cold?" She whispered, "No," though she clearly was. Without a word, he draped his coat over her shoulders. Her silence confused him. But he didn't push Dot. When they arrived, Amina expected a house full of demands and orders. Instead, the ranch home was quiet, clean, organized, and strangely peaceful. Cole showed her a small room near the kitchen and said, "This is yours." Amina froze, unsure how to respond. No one had ever given her her own space. "You don't owe me anything," Cole added softly. "Just rest. You must be tired." Amina's chest tightened. She wasn't used to kindness. She was used to being silenced. For days, she barely spoke, more than a few words. She worked quietly, cleaning, cooking, mending clothes. Whenever Cole entered a room, she stiffened as if expecting reprimand. But he only nodded, thanking her politely for her efforts. He never shouted, never touched her, never demanded explanations. One evening, she accidentally burned the stew. Fear froze her. Her heart pounded painfully. She whispered, I'm sorry," expecting anger. Cole tasted it, winced slightly, then smiled. "We all burn stew sometimes. Don't worry." Amina stared at him, struggling to understand a world where mistakes didn't lead to punishment. As days passed, Cole noticed how she avoided speaking, how her throat tightened when someone asked her a question, how she flinched at sudden noises. He didn't know her whole story, but he recognized fear. He had seen it before in broken horses, in battered ranch hands, in grief-stricken eyes after funerals. One windy afternoon, Amina stood outside hanging laundry when she heard her name. The voice belonged to a traveling merchant passing by the ranch. "That's the barren girl," he muttered to a companion. "Sold because she defied the wrong people." Amina froze. The truth hung in the air like smoke. Cole stepped out onto the porch just in time to see Amina's hands shaking, the clothesline slipping from her fingers. When the merchant rode off, Cole approached her slowly, like one approaches a frightened animal. Amina, he said softly, who told them you were barren. She swallowed hard, tears filling her eyes. For the first time, she whispered, it was a lie. They wanted to silence me. Cole's expression darkened, nodded her. At the injustice, you have a voice here, he said firmly. No one will silence you again. Amina looked at him, truly looked, and saw not a buyer, not a master, but a man willing to stand between her past and her future. For the first time in years, she felt her silence break not with fear, but with a small, trembling breath of hope. And in that breath began the first crack in the walls around her heart, a crack through which Cole's quiet, patient light would slowly enter. The night Amina was sold, snow fell heavily thick, silent flakes that swallowed the world in white. Winter in the northern plains was unforgiving, and so was hunger. Her family, desperate and cold, agreed to trade her for enough supplies to survive the season. They justified it by repeating the same cruel lie. She is barren. She is of no use to us. Amina wrapped her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders as Cole Harding, the widowed rancher, loaded the supplies into his wagon. He didn't look like a man interested in buying a wife. His face held quiet grief, his eyes as cold and distant as the winter sky. But he met her gaze once, just once, and she saw no cruelty there. Come, he said gently, offering his hand. She hesitated, then placed her trembling fingers in his. His hand was warm. The ride to his ranch was rough and icy. Amina shivered violently, and when Cole glanced at her shaking shoulders, he didn't hesitate. He took off his heavy wool coat, thick and lined with fur, and wrapped it around her carefully. You'll freeze, she whispered. I've weathered worse, he replied. She believed him. He rode with a strength that came from living through storms, both those outside and those inside his heart. When they arrived at the ranch, the world was silent, except for the crunch of snow under their boots. Amina expected a harsh command, a list of rules, perhaps a demand to act like a proper wife. Instead, Cole opened the door, lit a fire, and carried in blankets. You can warm up by the hearth, he said. No work tonight, Amina blinked, unsure how to absorb such unexpected kindness. In the following days, she familiarized herself with the ranch. The house was large but empty, rooms unused since Cole's wife had died. The air felt lonely, as if grief still lingered in the corners. Amina kept to her tasks, quietly cleaning, cooking, knitting, anything to repay his patience. But winter was merciless. One night, a snowstorm roared outside, howling like a wounded beast. The windows shook. Amina curled up in her room, fear gripping her. Her childhood had taught her to fear storms, for they always brought shouting, coldness, and pain. A soft knock came on her door. Amina Cole's voice was calm, steady. Are you all right? She opened the door slightly, embarrassed by her trembling. The storm is loud, she whispered. Cole nodded, as if he understood entirely. Would you like to sit by the fire? It's warmer there. She followed him to the main room. The fire crackled, painting the walls with gold and orange. Cole sat on one end of the long sofa, leaving plenty of space for her. You don't need to be afraid here, he said quietly. His voice held a sincerity that made her chest tighten. She nodded, unable to speak. The days grew longer as winter deepened. Amina worked gently around the house, and Cole respected her boundaries. He never touched her without permission. He never demanded affection. When she made meals, he thanked her genuinely. When she mended his shirts, he wore them proudly. When she tended the horses, he watched, impressed. One afternoon, she overheard two ranch hands talking outside the barn. It's a shame she's barren, one said. Cole don't care about that, the other replied. Hasn't cared for years. The word stung Amina deeply. That evening, she avoided Cole's eyes during supper. He noticed immediately what happened. He asked gently. Tears filled her eyes. They said, I cannot give you the children, a wife should. Cole's expression softened. He reached out but stopped halfway, letting her decide. When she didn't flinch, he rested his hand gently over hers. Amina, he said, his voice steady, I didn't bring you here to give me children. My heart isn't missing a child. It's missing peace, companionship. You. Her breath hitched. You are enough, he whispered. Outside, winter raged on. But inside the ranch, a warmth bloomed one stronger than any fire. Amina had always survived by being silent. Silence was her shield, her armor, her last defense against a world that never listened. Her family taught her early: speak less, endure more. When they sold her for being barren, they believed her silence proved she was weak, submissive, easy to discard, but they were wrong. Her silence held strength, quiet, deep, unbroken strength, and Cole Harding, the widowed rancher, was the first to see it. Life at the ranch was slow, peaceful, and foreign to her. Each morning Amina rose before sunrise, her steps light as she prepared tea and kindled the fire. She moved through the house with practiced gentleness, Cole noticed. Everything yet never intruded. Every day she learned a little more about him. How he paused at the door before entering rooms as if remembering someone who once stood there. How he touched the old rocking chair by the window with a quiet ache that needed no explanation. How he spent long hours alone in the barn, hands busy but thoughts far away. Both carried ghosts, but neither asked about the others. One cold morning, a problem arose on the ranch. A group of cattle broke through the fence and wandered toward the icy creek. Cole rushed out with 2 ranch hands, but they struggled against the storm winds. Amina watched from the porch, heart pounding. Then something unexpected happened. While the men struggled to redirect the cattle, a calf slipped dangerously close to the frozen water. Without thinking, Amina ran down the snowy path toward them. She moved quickly, ignoring the biting cold, calling out softly to the frightened animal while circling behind it. Her voice was calm, steady, almost musical. The calf responded immediately. Backing away from the danger, Cole stared at her in surprise when they finally herded the cattle back behind the fence. Cole approached her, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. "How did you do that?" he asked. Amina shrugged. "I used to help with the animals, before my family stopped letting me." Her words were simple, but Cole heard the truth beneath them. Her family did not value her, did not see her gifts, did not let her be more than a shadow. "You were brave," he said softly, "and smart." Amina blinked, unused to praise. "Anyone would have done it." "No," Cole replied gently, "they wouldn't." That day, he truly saw her not just the quiet girl he'd brought home, but a capable woman with instincts, calmness, and inner steel. Not weak, not fragile, strong in a way that didn't need noise to be real. Later that afternoon, as she prepared supper, Cole stood in the kitchen doorway, watching her in thoughtful silence. "You're not what people said you were," he finally said. Amina froze. "What? What did they say?" He stepped closer, his voice soft. "They said you were barren, that you were weak, that you had no fire in you." He shook his head. "But I see more fire in you than in people who've never suffered a day." She lowered her gaze, afraid to believe his words. "You don't have to speak loudly for your strength to show," Cole continued. "I see how you work, how you think, how you help. I see how you endure." His voice dipped, tender. "And I see how much you've survived." Amina's throat tightened. No one had ever acknowledged her silent battles before. She had lived, her whole life hidden in corners, unnoticed, and now here was a man who saw her clearly. Fully, without judgment. She whispered, "I don't know how to be anything else." Cole smiled gently. "Then be exactly who you are. That's more than enough." For the first time, her silence didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a language someone finally understood. And standing in the glow of the hearth, she realized Cole wasn't healing her alone. She was healing him, too. The summer storm rolled across the Montana plains like an angry beast, its roar echoing against the hills. Lightning cracked through the sky, bathing the ranch house in flashes of white blue. Inside, the wind howled against the wooden walls, and the lamps flickered under the pressure of the storm. Alara stood by the window, watching sheets of rain slam against the earth. Storms usually frightened her, not because of thunder, but because storms reminded her of that night. The night everything in her old life had shattered. The night her family decided she was barren, useless, and unworthy of keeping. The night they gave her away to strangers like a burden. She tried to steady her breath, but her hands had already begun to tremble. Across the room, Hayes noticed. He had been oiling the hinges of the big front door, trying to keep himself busy. But the moment he glanced at Alara, he saw the fear she was trying to hide. The thunder rolled overhead again, and she flinched barely, but enough for a man like Hayes to catch it. He set his tools down quietly. "Storm bothering you?" he asked gently. Elara shook her head too fast. "No, I'm fine." Her voice was thin, almost brittle. Hayes walked closer, but slowly, giving her space. "You don't have to be fine," he said quietly. "Not with me." Another flash of lightning lit up the sky, and her breath caught. She wrapped her arms tightly around herself, but the memories still pressed too close. The night her family dragged her out of her room, the voices shouting, the accusations, the way they locked the doors against her. After handing her over, the storm outside was nothing compared to the storm inside her chest. Hayes didn't push. Instead, he stood beside her, close enough to offer warmth, far enough not to overwhelm. His presence was steady, like the earth beneath the tremors of her memories. When another thunderclap shook the windows, she whispered, barely audible, "Storms." "I don't like storms." He nodded. "I figured." Then he added, "You don't have to tell me why, but if you want to, I'll listen." Elara swallowed hard. She hadn't planned on telling him anything that night. She never planned on telling anyone ever. But something about Hayes' the quietness, the honesty in his eyes, made her heart loosen its guard. "It was raining," she whispered. "The night they gave me away." Hayes didn't say a word. He didn't even shift. He stayed still and open, letting her choose how much to share. "They said I was useless." She continued, the words rasping out. "Said no man would ever want a woman who couldn't have children." Her breath hitched, "So they traded me off to settle a debt." The lightning flashed again, illuminating her tears. She quickly wiped them, embarrassed. "I'm sorry." "I shouldn't. Don't apologize," Hayes said firmly. "Not for this. Not ever." His voice had a weight to it she had never heard before. Protective, angry not at her, but for her. He gently reached out and touched her forearm. Not gripping, not pulling. Just a grounding, steady touch. "They were wrong," he said simply. "You hear me? They were wrong about you." Her eyes filled again, but this time the tears felt different, lighter. "Released. And I don't need children," Hayes added softly. "I don't need anything they claimed you weren't. He hesitated, breath-catching. "I just need you safe. You understand?" A soft, trembling breath left her lips. For the first time in years, she felt something warm, settled, inside her chest, a feeling she had thought she'd lost forever. Trust outside the storm raged on. Inside, Elara let herself lean a little closer to the man who was slowly teaching her what safety felt like. The morning after the storm, the entire ranch carried the scent of wet earth. The sky was washed clean, pale and bright, with sunlight. Dripping down the distant hills, it felt like a new beginning, at least to everyone, except Elara. She woke with a weight inside her chest. The storm had forced memories loose, and even though Hayes had been there steady, gentle, she still felt ashamed for breaking down. She wasn't used to anyone seeing her pain, let alone comforting her through it. Hayes knocked lightly on her door. "Breakfast's ready," he said, "and afterward, we're heading to town." "Town," she repeated, surprised. "Why?" He shifted, a little hesitant. "I made you an appointment with the doctor." Elara froze. A doctor. Her old life had taught her that doctors meant judgment, accusations, words that broke women. Words like barren. Hayes must have seen the panic flash through her eyes, because he raised his hands gently. "It's just a checkup," he assured. "Nothing else. I promise you, no one's going to call you names or treat you badly. Not while I'm there." She swallowed, torn between fear and the strange comfort he always brought. "I'll go," she whispered. "The doctor's office." Small-town clinic smelled of antiseptic and warm wood. Dr. Mara was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a gentle voice, nothing like the cold, dismissive doctors Elara remembered. Hayes sat beside her in the exam room, hands folded, giving her silent support. He didn't hover, didn't crowd, just stayed close enough that she could feel his steady presence. After a soft, respectful checkup, the doctor asked Elara, "Has anyone ever told you you couldn't have children?" Elara's hands tightened. In her lap, "Yes," she murmured. "They said I was barren. They said something was wrong with me." Hayes' jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Dr. Mara leaned forward, her voice firm but compassionate. "Well, I want to be very clear. There is nothing wrong with you." Elara blinked, stunned. "What?" "Everything looks perfectly normal." the doctor continued. You're healthy, strong. There's no medical sign that you can't bear children. Whoever told you that, they lied, or they didn't know what they were doing. For a moment, the world went blurry. All those years, all the shame, all the cruelty. A lie, Elara, the doctor added softly. You are not barren. Tears welled in her eyes, confusion, relief, anger, all tangled into something she didn't yet know how to name. Hayes reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand gently in his. See, he murmured, I told you, they broke you with words, not truth. Something in her chest cracked open, something long buried. She let out a trembling breath. All this time, they made me believe I was worthless. Hayes shook his head. You were never worthless. Leaving the clinic outside, the sun felt warm on her skin. Hayes walked beside her, quiet, letting her absorb the news at her own pace. Finally, she whispered, You didn't have to bring me here. I did, he said softly. Not to prove anything. Not for me, for you. Her steps slowed. Why? He looked at Horelli. Looked and his answer came from someplace deep inside him. Because I want you to see yourself the way I see you. A pause, a breath. Brave, worthy, more than what they said you were. Her throat tightened. The words touched a part of her soul no one had ever reached before. For the first time, Elara felt the chains of her past loosened just a little, and Hayes. He was becoming something she never expected. A reason to hope again. Here is Part 9, explained in 600 words. Part 9. The moment they realized they belonged 600 words, the ranch had grown quiet in the late afternoon. The kind of stillness that comes after a long day of work and sunburnt fields. Elara moved through the kitchen, stirring a pot of stew while her thoughts drifted to the doctor's news. She was not barren, not broken, not worthless. The truth was finally out, but it left her feeling both free and unsteady. Hayes entered the kitchen quietly, carrying a stack of freshly cut firewood. His tall frame filled the doorway, but there was a gentleness in his step, a quiet awareness of her fragile mood. He placed the wood by the hearth and leaned against the doorframe, watching her work. You've been quiet, he said softly, not like your usual thoughtful self. Something's on your mind. Elara set down the ladle, avoiding his gaze. I don't know how to feel. I've spent so long believing I was worthless, and now everything I thought was true it wasn't. But I don't feel different, yet I feel scared. Hayes moved closer, careful not to overwhelm her. That's normal. Healing takes time. Seeing the truth after a lifetime of lies, it's heavy. She glanced at him, finally meeting his eyes. There was no judgment, no expectation, no pressure, just a steady, reassuring presence. And suddenly, she realized something. She didn't have to be perfect for him. She didn't have to be what anyone else expected. You've been here all along, she whispered. Through the storms, through the silence. You've stayed. He nodded slowly. I promised I would, and I meant it. You weren't easy to see at first, not because you weren't strong, but because no one else ever looked closely enough. A gentle laugh escaped her, a soft sound she hadn't heard from herself in years. It carried a sense of release, like air finally filling her lungs after being held underwater too long. You didn't buy me for children, she said quietly. Or for what my family said I wasn't. You chose me. Not for anything else. Just me. Hayes stepped closer, tilting his head. Exactly. You are more than enough, Elara. You always were. I just needed you to see it too. The firelight flickered across the room, and in that glow, she finally allowed herself to let go of the past. She didn't need to justify herself. She didn't need to live under the weight of her family's lies. She belonged here on the ranch, by his side, in a life that was hers to claim. Her fingers brushed against his as she reached for the pot. Neither moved away. The simple touch held a weight of unspoken understanding, trust, and a growing bond that neither had fully named yet. I never thought anyone could see me, she admitted, her voice trembling. And now, I feel like I finally belong somewhere. Hayes' lips curved into a gentle smile. Then stay. Don't leave. You've already brought more life to this place than you know. Elara looked around the kitchen, the hearth, the neatly stacked firewood. The small garden visible through the window, and she realized he was right. She had transformed not just the ranch but herself. The person who had once felt worthless was beginning to bloom. The moment hung between them, quiet but charged with meaning. No grand gestures, no dramatic declarations, just the shared understanding that they were no longer alone, that together they could face whatever came next. "I want to stay," she whispered finally, "with you." Hayes' expression softened, his hand finally brushing hers fully, a gentle hold that promised safety, acceptance, and something more. "Then stay," he repeated. "I don't need anything else. Just you." For the first time in her life, Ilara felt the warmth of true belonging, not from a family that had sold her, not from obligations or expectations, but from someone who saw her worth and chose her anyway. Outside, the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long golden shadows over the ranch. Inside, two hearts once broken by loss and lies quietly began to mend together. If you want part 10, the final part, I can write it next in 600 words. Winter had faded into spring on the ranch. The snow had melted, leaving the earth soft and wet, promising new growth. Flowers were pushing through the soil, and the trees along the creek had begun to bud. Life was stirring everywhere but for Ilara. Life was finally starting within her as well. Since the day the doctor confirmed she was not barren, everything had changed. The weight of lies, shame, and fear that her family had piled upon her had begun to lift. She still carried scars, both visible and invisible, but each day she felt more capable of choosing her own path. And that path led firmly to Cole Harding, the man who had seen her not as a burden, not as property, but as a person worthy of love and respect. Cole, now standing by the fence line, watched her move through the garden, hands deep in the soil. Sunlight on her face, he had learned to recognize the quiet strength in Hertha, same strength he had seen the first day she guided a calf away from the icy creek. She had endured a lifetime of cruelty, yet she still had compassion, patience, and resilience, and he loved her for it, fiercely and quietly, without conditions or expectations. When she noticed him, she paused and smiled a soft, genuine smile that had begun to appear more often these days. Walking over, she brushed the soil from her hands. "You've been watching me again," she said teasingly, though her heart was pounding. Cole smiled back, his eyes calm and warm. "Just making sure my ranch is in good hands," he said lightly, but the hint of tenderness in his voice made her stomach flutter. Ilara laughed softly. "I'm not your servant," she said, "but I suppose I'm glad you're watching." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his presence fully. "You're not a servant, you're mine. Not in the way people think about ownership, but mine in the way that matters. My partner, my equal, my home." The words settled over her like sunlight, warm and reassuring. She had waited so long to hear someone speak like this, not about duty, not about children, but about choice and love. A breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of fresh grass and wildflowers. Ilara reached out, and Cole took her hand. She no longer flinched. The storms of her past, the lies of her family, the fear, the isolation felt distant. Here, with him, she had found safety. She had found trust. She had found love. "I never thought I'd hear that," she said softly, her voice trembling just a little. "That someone could want me. Just me." Cole tightened his grip, smiling gently. "I've always wanted you, Ilara. You didn't need to prove anything to me. You just had to be yourself." For the first time in her life, she believed it. She had been sold as barren, treated as property, cast aside by the family who should have cherished her. But in this moment, she realized that the only approval that mattered was the love she had earned, not given by birthright or marriage, but by living, by surviving, by being herself. Ilara leaned into him, letting her head rest against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her with quiet strength. Neither spoke for a while. The only sound, the soft rustling of leaves in the spring breeze. This was their beginning a life not defined by past pain, false labels, or societal expectations. Here, on this ranch, they would face whatever came next together. Children might come someday, or they might not, but neither mattered. What mattered was trust, partnership, and love. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the fields, Ilara lifted her gaze to Cole's face. He smiled down at her, patient, tender, unwavering. "I don't need anything else," he whispered. "Just you." And in that simple declaration, Alara knew with certainty that she had finally found her home. Her past could no longer define her. Her future would be built on choice, on love, and on the life she and Cole would shape together. The ranch, the wind, the sunlight, they all seemed to celebrate with her. For the first time, Alara stepped into a life that was truly hers, hand in hand with the man who had chosen her every day, not for what she could give, but for who she truly was.